Most people are raised to believe that being good is the highest ideal. Be polite, be agreeable, put others first, smile even when you're hurting, don't make waves, don't speak too loudly, don't disagree, just be good. But what if that very goodness is what's breaking you? Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher often known for his brutal honesty about the human condition, didn't believe in sugarcoating truth. He saw through the illusions society builds. And one of the greatest illusions is the moral pedestal of being good. Because in many cases, what we call goodness is not virtue. It is fear in disguise. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being seen as selfish or difficult. And so we play the role. We give more. We endure more than we should. We shrink ourselves into someone palatable, digestible, so we can belong. Schopenhauer believed that life, at its core, is driven by a blind, irrational force he called the will. This will doesn't care about goodness. It doesn't care about morality. It simply wants. It desires. It consumes. And human beings, he said, are often slaves to this force. Now think about that for a moment. If life is driven by insatiable desire, then constantly trying to be good, to serve others, to suppress your own needs, to pretend you have no will of your own, is not only unnatural, it is self-destructive. Because the world is not structured to reward self-erasure. It is structured to take from those who do not know how to say no. Being good in the eyes of others often means becoming invisible to yourself. You begin to notice this in your relationships. When your kindness is expected, not appreciated. When your silence is seen as agreement. When your willingness to help becomes a leash, not a gift. And here's the dark truth. The more good you try to be, the more agreeable, available, accommodating, the more people will test your boundaries. Not always out of malice, but out of instinct. Because in the absence of resistance, people will take. This isn't cynicism, it's pattern recognition. Schopenhauer saw it clearly. Much of human interaction is not governed by higher ideals, but by unconscious drives. If you don't assert yourself, someone else's will inevitably will. The cost of being the good person is often the betrayal of your deeper self. You begin to live according to other people's expectations rather than your own convictions. You become trapped in a loop, giving more, being drained more, and feeling more and more invisible with each passing day. And the worst part? You tell yourself it's noble. You convince yourself that being good is what makes you strong. But quietly, in the background of your mind, resentment grows. Exhaustion sets in. Your soul starts to fracture under the weight of this quiet performance. Schopenhauer wasn't suggesting we become cruel or indifferent. He was warning against the lie that self-sacrifice is always moral. He was exposing the damage done when we ignore our own will in the name of pleasing others. Real strength is not found in being endlessly agreeable. It's found in honesty, in integrity, in saying no when it's uncomfortable, in risking disapproval to stay true to yourself. To live as only the good person is to deny your full humanity. It is to amputate your assertiveness, your needs, your hunger, your edge, the very things that make you real. And the irony is, the more you suppress those parts of yourself, the more they begin to leak out in unhealthy ways. Passive aggression, bitterness, burnout, silent suffering that no one notices because you've trained everyone to believe you're fine. The danger of always being the good one is that you become the easy one, the reliable one, the one who bends, accommodates, absorbs. People stop asking if you're okay because you never complain. They stop wondering if they've crossed a line because you never draw one. And slowly, you begin to disappear. Not all at once, but piece by piece. One silent agreement, one fake smile, one swallowed truth at a time. Schopenhauer believed that most suffering arises from our refusal to confront reality. And the reality is this: if your goodness is based on self-denial, it will break you. It doesn't matter how kind you are if your kindness is rooted in fear. It doesn't matter how helpful you are if your help leaves you empty. It doesn't matter how much you give if you have to abandon yourself to do it. Because what's often praised as virtue is just submission in disguise. This is not a call to become hardened or cruel. It's a call to reclaim your will, to stop apologizing for having needs, to stop feeling guilty for drawing boundaries, to stop sacrificing your energy on altars that only demand more. There is a quiet violence in always putting others first, the violence of self-neglect. And over time, it leaves scars that no one sees. Because you've learned to hide them behind a smile. You think you're doing the right thing, but what you're really doing is teaching the world how to ignore you. Schopenhauer saw this as a tragic outcome of a world governed by desire, where people become means rather than ends, where the one who is most willing to serve is often the one most likely to be used. So the question becomes, where do you draw the line between goodness and self-destruction? How much of your life have you spent being good at your own expense? How many times have you agreed when your soul screamed no? How many times have you stayed quiet? Not out of wisdom, but out of fear. The path to wholeness begins the moment you decide that being real is more important than being liked, that being honest is more valuable than being polite, that protecting your energy is more necessary than earning approval. Because true goodness, the kind that heals rather than breaks, comes from alignment, not obedience. It comes from choosing to be kind, not being conditioned to be submissive. Schopenhauer's dark truth isn't meant to dishearten you. It's meant to awaken you, to pull you out of the role you were trained to play and into the person you were meant to become. And becoming that person requires friction. It requires saying no when everything in you is afraid of rejection. It requires risking discomfort, judgment, and even conflict, because without it, you remain trapped in a cycle that was never meant for you. Eventually, you start to see that your value isn't in how much you tolerate. It's in how deeply you respect yourself, enough to stop living in reaction to what others want and start living in response to what you truly need. There is a moment, quiet, personal, often lonely, where you realize the version of you that everyone loved was never fully you. It was the edited version, the agreeable version, the non-threatening, always smiling, endlessly giving version. And when that hits, something inside you shifts. You stop trying to be liked at all costs. You stop trying to smooth every edge, to be understood by everyone, to be the peacekeeper in every room. You stop making yourself small so others can be comfortable. Schopenhauer would call this the beginning of freedom, not external freedom, but inner liberation. The ability to stand in your truth even when it's inconvenient, even when it's misunderstood, even when it costs you approval, connection, or comfort. Because the alternative is living a life that doesn't belong to you. The longer you play the role of the good one, the harder it becomes to remember who you were before the role began. You start to believe the act. You start to forget your fire. You forget that you're allowed to take up space, to disagree, to be intense, to want more. But here's the thing, your authenticity is not a problem to fix. It's not something to suppress in the name of being nice. It's the very thing that will save you. The world doesn't need more agreeable people. It needs more people who are rooted, whole, awake. People who have faced themselves deeply enough to no longer need permission to be real. Schopenhauer's warning isn't about turning bitter. It's about waking up. It's about refusing to betray yourself just to keep the peace. Because a peace that costs your soul isn't peace. It's quiet devastation. And once you've tasted what it's like to live in alignment with your truth, once you've set a boundary and felt your spine grow stronger, you can never go back. You'll still be kind, but it will be real kindness, not performance. You'll still give, but from overflow, not obligation. You'll still care, but not at the expense of yourself. This is where strength begins, not in how much you can endure, but in how much of yourself you're willing to reclaim. You realize that goodness without truth is just compliance. It's a script you were handed, not a choice you consciously made. And that's the real shift. When you stop acting out the version of you that pleases everyone and start choosing the version of you that honors your reality. At first, it feels like rebellion, saying no, disappointing people, letting others be uncomfortable. But over time, it begins to feel like integrity, like sanity, like coming home to yourself. Schopenhauer didn't believe in comfort for comfort's sake. He believed that suffering was inescapable, but it could be made meaningful. And what's more meaningful than freeing yourself from a false life? Because that's what always being good can become, a false life. A life built on avoiding conflict, on making sure no one is upset, on silencing your instincts just to be seen as noble. But there is no nobility in disappearing. There is no courage in always agreeing. And there is no virtue in being the person everyone loves if that person isn't really you. You were not meant to be endlessly flexible. You were meant to be deeply rooted. You were not born to be easy to digest. You were born to be whole. And wholeness includes your anger, your needs, your fire, your boundaries. When you start reclaiming those parts, people might push back. They might say you've changed. They might guilt you, shame you, question your intentions. But the truth is, you're not changing. You're returning. You're peeling away the layers of conditioning that told you your worth came from being easy. And that return will feel radical to those who benefited from your silence. Let them be uncomfortable. Because if your goodness relies on self-abandonment, then it's not goodness. It's a performance. And when you stop performing, you stop attracting people who love the role and start drawing those who love the real you. Even the inconvenient, unfiltered, passionate, imperfect you. That's what Schopenhauer was pointing toward. Not a life free of suffering, but a life free of illusion. A life lived from the core rather than the mask. And that kind of life, it may not always be easy, but it will be yours. There's a quiet revolution that happens when you no longer need to be perceived as good. Not cruel, not reckless, but whole. Whole enough to live without performing, to choose truth over comfort, to face rejection without collapsing. And once you cross that threshold, you begin to see the cost of your old self. How many times you swallowed your voice. How many moments you tolerated the intolerable. How many versions of yourself you buried just to avoid disappointing others. You feel the weight of it, the subtle exhaustion of carrying a life that wasn't really yours. And beneath that, the grief, not for what you lost, but for what you never gave yourself permission to become. Schopenhauer would say that this confrontation with reality is painful, but it's also clarifying. You see that much of what you called kindness was really a plea to be chosen. That much of what you called love was self-sacrifice dressed in virtue. That much of what you called strength was just your ability to disappear on cue. But now, Now you begin to ask different questions. Not, will they still like me if I say no? But, will I still like myself if I say yes? Not, how do I keep the peace? But, what parts of me am I betraying to avoid conflict? These are not easy questions, but they are honest. And honesty, Schopenhauer believed, is the beginning of freedom. Not the kind of freedom that's loud or glamorous, but the kind that lets you sleep at night. The kind that restores your dignity, the kind that whispers, you don't have to live like this anymore. You start to realize that you are not here to be endlessly available, constantly agreeable, or permanently pleasing. You are here to live in alignment with what is real, even if that means being misunderstood, even if it means letting go, even if it means standing alone. And in that space, that raw, unpolished, unapologetic space, you finally meet yourself. You meet the version of you that never needed approval to be worthy. The one who doesn't apologize for existing with edges, with hunger, with limits. The one who has sat with discomfort long enough to know it's survivable and often necessary. And from that place, everything begins to shift. You don't react the way you used to. When someone crosses a line, you don't explain or defend, you simply enforce. When guilt tries to creep in, you recognize it as the echo of a former life, not a signal to return to it. People may say you've become distant, cold, unavailable. But what they really mean is, you've stopped being convenient. You've stopped leaking your energy in the name of being nice. You've stopped handing over your peace just to make sure no one else has to feel their own discomfort. This is not cruelty. This is clarity. Because for the first time, you're not living for the image of goodness. You're living from the truth of wholeness. And here's what's quietly beautiful about that shift. The peace that used to cost you everything no longer costs you anything. You no longer need to perform for it, chase it, plead for it. You create it by saying no, by honoring your time, by standing where you once bowed. You begin to see that true goodness isn't passive, it's powerful. It's not in how much you give up, it's in how fully you show up. Schopenhauer understood that life will always contain suffering, but it doesn't have to contain your self-erasure. And when you stop being afraid to disappoint others, you stop disappointing yourself. So you continue, not with a louder voice, but a steadier one, not to prove anything, but to embody everything you were always meant to be before the world told you who you had to become. The more you reclaim yourself, the more you notice how much of your life was built around avoidance, avoiding confrontation, avoiding rejection, avoiding the risk of not being liked. But avoidance is not peace. It's a pause button on your own existence. And eventually you realize you can't keep pressing pause and expect to feel alive. Schopenhauer's philosophy, often labeled pessimistic, is actually an invitation to depth. To strip away illusion, to stop expecting life to be fair, people to be selfless, and approval to equal love. When you accept this, not with bitterness, but with clarity, you stop bargaining, you stop begging it to treat you gently just because you treated it kindly. Instead, you start to build a life that doesn't rely on anyone else's permission. You say what you mean, you leave when it's time, you give without expectation, and you withhold when it costs too much. Not out of cruelty, but out of respect. For yourself, for your time, for your boundaries. That's when the guilt begins to fade. Because guilt only survives where you still believe your value comes from pleasing others. And once you know that your worth is not tied to your sacrifice, guilt has no home left to live in. People might still call you, but this time, it won't be because you made yourself small. It will be because you stood tall in rooms where you used to shrink. Because you were kind without abandoning yourself. Because you were firm without losing your heart. That's a different kind of goodness. The kind that doesn't require you to break to prove you're whole. Being good will break you if your goodness is built on self-erasure. If it asks you to silence your truth, to exhaust yourself for others, to shrink just to be accepted, then it is not goodness. It is surrender. And you were not meant to surrender your existence in exchange for approval. Schopenhauer's dark truth is not a call to cynicism. It is a call to wake up, to see that true virtue is not about pleasing others, but about living in alignment with what is real, with what honors you, strengthens you, and allows you to exist fully, without apology, without permission, without guilt. So if you've been carrying the weight of being the good one, the one who never says no, the one who never disrupts, ask yourself, at what cost? How much of yourself have you lost in the process? And how much longer are you willing to play a role that was never meant to be your whole identity? Because the truth is, the moment you stop seeking to be good and start choosing to be whole, everything changes. If this resonated with you, take a moment to reflect. Drop a comment and let me know. Where in your life have you been sacrificing yourself in the name of being good? And if you found this valuable, consider liking the video and subscribing for more insights on philosophy, self-awareness, and reclaiming your life on your own terms. Your journey matters. Live it fully.